Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, I assure you. But here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming, especially during these past 2 years. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, and Talking Toddlers, this podcast helps you develop that with clarity, confidence, and clear communication. So let's get started. Welcome back to Talking Toddlers. I'm Erin Heyer, your host, and this episode we will jumpstart talking by peeling back the layers of 4 central pillars. And I think many professionals in my field, pediatricians, parents, educators, we miss the mark because we don't realize how critical these 4 pillars interrelate. My goal here is to help you, mom, build a healthy child with strong communication, resiliency, and a central core that is flexible and ready to learn. So let's look at these 4 pillars. Keep in mind, in the back of your mind, that early speech and language and all developmental progress, whether it's motor or cognition, emotional development, self-regulation, there are predictable patterns. And so always keep that in mind. And that's what I'm sharing here each and every week about what are these predictable patterns and what can we do to enhance them. So before I get started, just a little word of caution. No one knows your child like you do. And yet, sometimes we as parents can get so wrapped up in celebrating all the beautiful things that are happening, all this wonderfulness around your new baby and your exploratory toddler, right? We overlook some of the areas that could be challenging. And I just want to put it out there right here in the forefront that parents, moms in particular, we find a really hard time being objective with our own baby, right? It takes a lot of internal strength, a lot of courage to step up. And that's why I have always truly commended a parent, usually the mom, who is courageous enough to pick up that phone and make that first phone call when there are questions or doubts, and to be able to say, I need help, or I don't know, can you give me some guidance? Because what it represents, perhaps, underneath our fear, underneath our worry, is that my child isn't perfect. And it's not that we expect perfection, but we really strive for a healthy, well-adjusted, in line, in sync little baby, right? So then we can have the normal challenges, but we don't have to face something that might be overwhelming and emotionally distraught, right? It's also when we pick up that phone and we make that first contact, we also might be feeling like, oh my gosh, I've messed up. Things aren't unfolding like the books say, or like my previous baby, or my sister's baby, or my best friend's baby, right? Is it me? Is it him? Is it us? And so it is incredibly hard to reach out and ask for help or clarification. And I just want you to know that whether there's nothing wrong or whether you do have to face something, Children are incredibly resilient, incredibly malleable. That's what neuroplasticity is. That's what human growth, change, and develop. And I really, really want to embrace this. And so when I talk about these 4 central pillars, it's about being able to tap into our beautiful human nature and take full advantage of our God-given gifts in this neuroplasticity, in this growth, and what can we do each and every day to help support that. So just a word of caution that I know you've got this. I know it's challenging, and yet we can do it. So let's look at what is human communication. And I know that, again, many people talk about the nonverbal and the verbal, right? But it's really important that we, as the new parents, and hopefully there are some professionals out there, some young speech and language pathologists, because we don't really dive deep into this in our clinical work, and it's over time. I've been at this for 35 years. I've been in it with hundreds and probably thousands of children and families, right? But to understand the neuroscience of how the brain wires itself based on its experience with you, the parents, and you, the family, and you, the primary caretakers. And so that right hemisphere is really wiring up and collecting information and storing the nonverbal, the gestures, facial expression, pitch, tone, body language, all of that wiring up, while at the same time, that left hemisphere is collecting data on the sounds, the words, the sentences, and the paragraphs or conversational level is built up through that structure of language and the physical component of talking. And so both nonverbal and verbal are being developed at the same time. And I talk a lot about we can't compartmentalize a human being. Even though we study them in these small little boxes, we have to always stay aware of how it's all interconnected. And so I just always want to preface when I talk about speech and language processing and motor development and cognition and learning and mastery, it's always an intricate system. So there are predictable patterns that we're going to walk through when we look at these 4 really essential pillars. And if you haven't already listened to my couple of episodes on late talkers, those would be episodes number 29 and 30. They were published back in December. You might want to go back and review those. I even present 4 real life cases so you can get a really good feel and an inside scoop of how we look and assess individual children to figure out where they are and what truly is a late talker versus other things, or can we just rule it out and realize that our child is marching to his own drum, but on path and on track to, really unfolding into a beautiful young toddler. So what I'm going to walk through with this process or this topic of the 4 pillars is how natural human communication works when we give them opportunity to literally build it. Remember, they come to us, under construction, and we are the architects. We are helping them shape and build from the inside out. So under these 4 pillars, I'm going to review what we want to see under these areas, perhaps looking at some red flags, and then what can you do to improve or to support? And so even if your child is totally on track, always make sure that you're thinking about these 4 pillars. And if you do have concerns, I'm going to give you some suggestions of how to support your beautiful child right there at home every day easily. So the first pillar is social interaction. And this I talk a lot about on my episodes, and every single case was really looking at that first pillar of building this foundation to human communication and rich learning and flexibility with being a human in this very complex world, right? All communication begins with an interaction between 2 people, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, right? And so until your child learns to pay attention to others, to listen to what others say, to initiate contact with others, right? To kind of start a conversation, and to truly enjoy playing together, enjoy other human beings, he's not ready to understand and use words. So we have to lay this first foundation to pay attention to others. And I've mentioned this before, and please remember that the first real primal skill that babies come into this world is that auditory connection. I'm going to find my mama's voice, right? To pay attention to all this noise, all this stuff that's going on, whether it's as a home birth or in a hospital, or, like my dear friend who had the baby in the car at the garage. So it's right away is this auditory, like, where's mama's voice, or any human voice, because that's my saving grace, right? But they also, that paying attention within those 6 to 8 inches of finding that visual field, right? You bring the baby to your face and make that connection, and really trying to filter out all this other crap, right? It's just about you and your baby, right? And then to listen to others, that's that auditory mapping. Again, babies are born ready and hardwired to learn any language. They're citizens of the world. So right from the get-go in utero, right? We've talked about this before, that they're mapping that native language, and they can pre-code, right? They come into this world, and within 45 minutes, we know that they can discriminate their native language that their mother spoke to them and a foreign language, right? Pruning starts right off the bat. And then to initiate contacts with others, that's that initial cry, like, oh my God, I'm in this world and I don't know what to do. I'm in panic, right? And then they learn how to differentiate their cries, and they're going to initiate contact with you and engage with you, interact with you through their different cries. And then they grunt, and then they learn how to squeal and verbally communicate, right? They're making noises out of that mouth. They coo and they babble, and they begin to reach and grab, and all of these ways of how to initiate contact with you. And then they begin to play. And within those first couple of months, there's a little turn taking, right? There's a little sharing this moment of, ooh, ah, gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. And they really begin to enjoy the presence. It's not just about survival anymore after that first month, right? It's really about like, there might be a little bit more to this world that might satisfy me. And so I'm going to continue at building this relationship through social interaction. That's pillar number 1. So social contact, social interaction is a way to connect. It's a feeling we get just being with each other, right? You can look across the room and you can wink at your partner, and that's a way to connect, even if there's, 50 people in the room, right? But what we want to see in your babies is that they're naturally interested in other people. It's, once they get beyond that survival instinct, we want babies to begin to feel calm and self-regulated, and that they start to attend, if they're feeling centered inside, then they can start to attend with information, stuff outside, other people, other actions, other objects, animals, different environments, from, walking around quietly in your living room and then stepping on the balcony or the front porch, and being able to recognize that the environment has changed. But we want to see your baby enjoy other people, especially their faces, right? And that they smile and they laugh, they get excited when you talk and coo and spend time with them. And by the time he's 6 months of age, they really are building relationships with their primary caretakers, right? Mom, dad, grandparents, sister, right? The dog. This is a huge development. And I know that you all get this from kind of this duh, Aaron moment, that of course these first 6 months are important, but the pillar to this is really that social interaction. And I think in today's society, with so many kids struggling, and the numbers have spiked, and I've mentioned this before, and we'll continue to talk about this, but the earlier that we can recognize when your child or someone that you know and love is struggling, then the better we can help enhance his life experience and take full advantage of that neuroplasticity that we can wire and build stronger, healthier, more fluent neural pathways, right? And that's what these episodes are all about, is taking the pragmatics of parenting, right, every day, and getting that background knowledge of, what am I doing when I change his diaper? How am I helping him learn and appreciate this world and understand this world and engage with me? It's not just about cleaning his bum, right? It's about that moment in time where I'm helping connect and socialize with him, build a rich language environment, and entice him to want to learn with me, right? And so these first 6 months, and I cover it in a lot of details with a lot of different areas, that, from learning how to sit up independently. When, a couple episodes ago, I talked all about, baby-led weaning, and how you begin at 6 months to introduce solid foods, how they're really shifting from kind of accidentally making voices and gurgling sounds to babbling, to change the articulators to make different sound patterns. One, because it feels good in my mouth, the baby says, but also it gets a reaction from you. And that's interaction. That's social and connection. So these first 6 months that they have spent hours upon hours upon hours of tummy time. By 6 months, they should be spending 60 to 90 minutes on tummy time, building all of that frontal musculature as well as their back musculature, and learning how that right hemisphere and left hemisphere are talking to one another. The arms and the legs and the upper and the lower motor neurons have spent 6 months trying to wire. So now my body is more coordinated, so I can listen to your spoken words because my body is more integrated, and I'm able to then attend better because I feel better from the cells outward, right? And so all of this, even 6-month-olds are beginning, some kids, to roll over. They're really, really have built this remarkable system in 6 months. It's kind of breathtaking. So toddlers with typically developing language skills are not difficult to engage. And I want to make that really clear. Yes, they're busy by nature. Yes, they require a lot of energy, but they're not typically hard to engage. And so they want to be included in your day-to-day activities. They want to show you things. They want to try to get your attention, right? They're all egocentric at this time, but it's like, look at me, look what I'm doing. I'm dumping these blocks again for the umpteenth time. Or look at me, I've just made a mess of the laundry pile that you just sorted. They also typically have a lot of healthy joint attention, and they want to share an event because it feels good, right? When they look at a book with you and look at you and try to connect and, oh my gosh, that's a pretty picture. I don't know what it is, but it's fun and it makes you excited. And they want to be in the moment because it feels good to be in it with you, right? And so that smile that you often see with ease, that's what we want to see. That's what a typical healthy language communicate. That's a nonverbal skill, right? That smile and that natural eye gaze. That's human communication. They're connecting to your inner soul. You've seen it with babies and toddlers where you're just in it together. And that's natural. So, what are some of the red flags? And I think it's pretty common knowledge, this list, but I want to contrast it with what I just described, right? They're poor or fleeting eye contact. There is not that I see your soul through your eyes, right? That they don't really want to get your attention through eye contact, right? They might look at you if there's a subtle noise, or if you've called their name, or if you open the refrigerator, right? They'll make that eye contact like, oh, I'm going to get something to eat. And unfortunately, there are a lot of kids who aren't interested in other people. They seem to ignore other people. So that's a red flag. And they're not consistently, and that's the key, consistently responding to his or her name by 12 months. So again, many of these things are emerging. Many of these things are on this kind of trajectory of development. But by 12 months, they should consistently respond to their name. Another red flag would be that a child doesn't look where you're pointing. Even if you say, look, Johnny, and you're pointing, maybe outside to, the trash or the trash truck or something, right? But if they're not looking where you're pointing by 12 months, that's another key. But another red flag would be that they seem to attend to objects or screens or apps more than people. And the whole idea about human communication is what makes us special, right? We're separate from the birds and the snakes and the dogs, is that we converse with one another with a systematic language, right? And so they were hardwired to want to verbally communicate. And so when they're more interested in objects or screens than you or their sibling, then that's a red flag, right? And there's another red flag would be that there isn't real back and forth during verbal and nonverbal activities, whether you're just making funny noises as you're changing them, or giving them raspberries as you're tucking them into bed, or engaged with the facial expressions or the babbling or the cooing sound that, by 6 months, by 8 months, by 12 months, there's a real back and forth, purposeful connection, right? The last red flag that I'm noting here is that they might not initiate or respond to cuddling. And I say might because a lot of parents and teachers will get confused that if they're affectionate, then, they're okay, right? They're socially okay. They're developing that interaction with other humans. But that's not always the case. And so I've met a lot of kids who had pretty significant developmental delays and they're very affectionate, right? They're connected. But so there's a different quality to that. So just kind of keep that in mind. And my purpose with covering these 4 essential pillars is not, to isolate these red flags per se, but to contrast them with what is a healthy, natural, rich developmental process with some of these concerns, and how can you look at them with a critical eye and discernment, and what can you do to help support and build those neural connections better and faster and richer. So if a child, your child, demonstrates several of these red flags, not all of them, but several, and so that first pillar is weak, that interaction skill, then it might indicate something more serious than just a late talker. And that's why I referred you back to episodes 29 and 30, where I really kind of walk through that evaluation process of what is and is not a late talker. So when this interaction pillar is compromised or weak or shaky or inconsistent, then we need to look at what can we build up in his life experience, because again, for the umpteenth time, and I will say this over and over and over again, because I believe that we're wired to always grow and learn and change. But neuroplasticity means that how can I enrich his life experience so he or she can reach his best, right? And never, ever, ever, ever give up, right? So, what can you do to improve interaction? 1, get down on his or her level. Always, always, always. And I've no matter what child I'm engaging with, whether it's in my practice or at the grocery store or, just meeting someone, I always get down to their level. Now, I might not get too close to them because I don't want to freak them out, but I want that eye to eye, right? So you, mom and dad and grandparents, and I know it's hard as we get older, but do our best. Manipulate the environment so you're eye to eye, right? Either get on the floor or, sit at on the coffee table if he's standing. Sit at a kid's table, your child on the couch, and you can be on your knees in front of them. So you're face to face. Get in it with them. Right? Find things that she is interested in doing and get in their space, right? Do it over and over and over. If they're interested in dolls, if they're interested in puzzles, if they're interested in, blocks or trains or balloons or whatever, then use that as your facilitating tool and bring interest to them. Like, ooh, I love balloons too. Or, ooh, I love Mr. Potato Head. Get in it with them. Number 2, encourage looking, sharing, and imitating. And you do this by focusing on routines, right? And building that fluency in your day. You can use some toys, again, items that they're interested in, little games or songs, like think about, Ring Around the Rosie, right? And I have walked into dozens and dozens of different preschool settings, and I can get a whole group of kids doing Ring Around the Rosie in a heartbeat, right? And they love it. And interestingly enough, some of the teachers have looked at me like, wow, you're doing it with them. And I'm like, yeah, we have to model, right? We have to encourage, when we're singing that song, Ring Around the Rosie, you all know it, but we get them to imitate with us, even if they don't necessarily understand the whole idea about this game or activity, but it looks fun. It sounds fun. You're being silly, right? Or if it's a one-to-one and you get them on their lap and you do row, row, row your boat, something like that, where they're really looking at you, a little movement. Not a lot. You're not being crazy and running, bouncing off the walls, right? Ring Around the Rosie is a pretty controlled, simple thing that you can repeat over and over again. Same with row, row, row your boat. But it's close contact and they can share it with you. So get down on their level, encourage through sharing and imitation, little games and activities. Number 3, I know I say this almost every episode, limit screen time. It's a slippery slope. And I know that parents you either struggle with it or you're like, no, this is just part of my day. I get it. But we know that more than 2 hours a day for any preschooler, that's like a 5-year-old and under, really spikes their risk for delays. And, but if you're concerned or you just want to enhance the rich interaction skill that they're already developing, then I would say turn off screen time completely for any child who's 24 months and younger, and use it strategically. And I do have an episode coming. I think it's in a month or two. Because I'm doing a deep dive, a research of what's out there in the research, which is very limited and biased. And let's just look at what is real, healthy, strong neurodevelopment and child development. And then let's be pragmatic, right? Number 4, do not let your child, if there's an engagement problem, don't let them check out, right? So get down to their level, encourage sharing and imitating tasks through natural routines, limit screen time because it's a nasty, slippery slope and it does not serve neurological development or self-regulation or sleep or a bunch of other stuff. And don't let them check out or just do their own thing. And I think a lot of parents do this subconsciously on many levels because they're not really clear of what to do, right? One, playing with little babies and toddlers is difficult for most adults. And then if you have a child who is a bit reserved or not outgoing or not in your face or, then, and he seems happy over there playing by himself, you don't want to disrupt that, right? But what happens, I think, unbeknownst to parents and educators and doctors, is that we let them stay in their own little bubble. And the whole idea about these first 3 years, 5 years, 10 years is to build a very strong, human being that connects with others, that can turn it on and off, that has self-regulation, that can process, right? And be in a wide variety of environments with self-control, and to learn from doing and learn by studying and to have this kind of wired human system, right? But if you stay stuck, and then that's not helping them build that. And from the very, very, very beginning, they're your baby, all of us humans are wired to be with other people. We're actually hardwired to want to verbally communicate, and we're hardwired to want to be with other people because that's how we survive, right? It goes back to that. So keep in mind, what can you do to help improve natural human interaction? Talk, 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 sing, even if you think it's poor. I know my singing is yucky, but I sing all the time. Play, chase, hop, roll around, dance, do it with them, right? Build their attention. Make you the most important thing and the most interesting thing beyond, that book that he's obsessing on, or, you need to be more interesting than that screen, right? Build interaction, engagement through being together, doing together, and showing together, right? Okay. Central pillar number 2 is how a child understands. And I think this is one of the pillars that is often misunderstood by educators, speech pathologists like myself. I don't think I really understood that, how critical auditory processing or developing an understanding for your native language is actually wiring the brain for cognition and higher order learning. I didn't get that in the very beginning. And I really didn't understand that until I studied school age kids and those children who had pretty significant auditory language processing problems and how that held back their ability to learn, right? To build that higher order thinking, because that's what we use to problem solve or to reason or to organize ourselves. We use language to solve problems, right? And so what happens in the very, very beginning, in those first 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, is that they're trying to figure out how the world works around them and how they fit into this world and into these different environments, right? And the best way to help them is to create routines. So then they begin to understand through doing and being of what's expected of them. Right? And that it reduces their stress because they can anticipate. And that's what all that early learning really is helping them. So, those first 6 months, they don't have a lot of understanding of the spoken word, but they build an understanding of what we do together. And so there are 3 primary cognitive milestones that are critical in this first year, right? The first one is object permanence. And again, this is a term that, anybody that's ever read any parenting book or article or journal or flyer, thinks about object permanence, right? But it's really important that your baby understands that things don't disappear if they can't see them. And the reason why it's so critical in this early development is because then you're wiring the brain that they can have an imagination. They can, when you say, oh, let's go to the park, they know what the park looks like. They know how it feels, of course, right? But they can see it and they can feel it through that emotional state, right? But object permanence is really critical in helping build that first layer of imagination, right? And then the second milestone, cognitive milestone, would be cause and effect. And that he can actually make things happen. Think of the toddler or the baby who realizes that if I push this button, this light goes on and off, right? Those infamous repetitive light switches. But that he has power then. And so this whole cause and effect, that I do this and something happens, right? And again, that he's in it and making shifts in his environment, right? And again, these are precursors to conversational speech. These are precursors to sitting in a classroom and listening to a lecture. These are precursors to problem solving if, you find that, your plumbing is leaking somewhere, right? But it's all that higher order thinking starts when they're babies and they fidget with, the doorknob, or they, realize that they can pull this knob and open the cupboard, or they can, turn this light on and off, like I said. But that whole kind of cause and effect is critical to understanding that when I say something, verbal communication, you're going to respond. Good, bad, or indifferent, I'm going to get a reaction, right? Or hopefully. Okay, so then the third cognitive milestone is simple problem solving. So once they realize that things don't disappear if they're not in their view, and they have some kind of effect if they do something, right? That whole cause and effect. Then they begin to explore simple problem solving, right? Such as like in motor planning and coordination and strength that develops by experimentation, right? And it's sort of like once your baby starts crawling somewhere around that 8th month, give or take, and they realize that, say they crawl up to the coffee table and they're like, okay, how do I continue moving? I was, on a mission here. And so then they start to figure out how to motor plan and coordinate their body in this 3-dimensional world to pull up to a stand, right? Or how to scurry around it. So that's the problem solving, right? Or say they are a little bit more, developed and they have fine motor skills and they're trying to figure out a puzzle piece. And can I build this internal attention to wiggle this piece and keep turning it over and around until it fits into the slot, right? That's literally wiring the brain. So they don't do it just for the heck of it. They don't do it because it's cute. They don't do any of this. They're doing it to wire their brain. And even though you and I use the term play, and sometimes it's a 4-letter word for us adults. Oh, I just played on Saturday. This is really a workout for them, right? It's effort. And it should be joyful. With that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of it should be really, really pleasant. And then 20%, like, oh, for the umpteenth time, I can't get this puzzle piece in, or, oh, somehow mom has locked this door and no matter how many times I wiggle the doorknob, it doesn't open anymore. And so this whole simple problem solving is done through play or simple actions, right? And I think it's really often misunderstood or missed by speech and language pathologists, for sure, educators, pediatricians. They might understand it, but I don't think they communicate it effectively with parents, right? That cognitive and thinking skills are being developed every single day through everyday activities. They might be simple to you and me, but just think about the whole mastery of crawling, for example, and I often use this, is pretty monumental to an 8 or 9-year-old because that's freedom. They can now move in this 3-dimensional world all by themselves. That's huge. So just keep that in perspective as we work through these essential pillars. So building these cognition skills from the get-go, right, through object permanence, cause and effect, simple problem solving, really is building that initial layer of understanding what people say in the very near future. So that second half of that first year, between 6 and 12 months, the pruning really starts happening, the pruning in the brain and sorting what their native language really is and how these auditory representations, right? Cat, that particular sequence, cat, kitty cat, no matter how you say it, that represents a certain thing that for most babies is pleasant, right? But we need those first 6 months pretty solid so then they can begin to represent spoken words or to use spoken words as a representation of actions, objects, feelings, all of that. So between 6 and 12 months, pruning really gets amped up. And then between 12 and 18 months, there's an explosion with associations of words. And then that really begins to support their following directions, right? It's not just labeling things, but now you're asking me things to do or to engage with, right? That receptive language, they're really understanding that it's a give and take between that 12 and 18 months. It's just emerging, mind you. It's just emerging. But that's where you're sharing a book and you say, oh, where's the apple? Show me. Apple. And then, they're beginning to point and you can take his little finger and you can show him how to point. Oh, apple, you're touching the apple. Point to the apple. So the takeaway here is that until a child learns to understand words and that words represent things and emotions and actions, so until he learns to understand these words, he's not ready to use them. And so that's why it takes 12 months, that first year, to really map out the beginning of his native language, right? So he has been practicing the motor skills with some of the vocalizations, and he's practicing some of those interactive skills, right? You coo and he coos and you both coo together, right? But about 12 months of age, he's had enough auditory experience and rich language wiring that now he begins to really understand that cat is this object, drink is something I do, right? Walk or pick up. Those words represent concrete pieces to their day, right? But they have to understand them before they can use them. So keep that in mind. Some red flags for this second pillar of how your child learns to understand. He doesn't look at you when you call his name by his first birthday, right? Again, I've mentioned that before, that connection. He's had enough auditory experience that he knows that, Bobby or Susie or Carrie or whatever her name is, that auditory representation means me. I need to respond and connect, right? They're not really picking up on facial expressions by 12 months. They're not using gestures, like waving goodbye or blowing a kiss. High five, those initial gestures that are critical because those are precursors. Again, the gestures represent communication. By 18 months, they should be able to follow simple directions, like go get your shoes or pick up the teddy without cues or pointing, right? Don't give them a hint. You say, I wonder where your shoes are. We can go to the park. Go find your shoes, right? Another red flag is that they don't look or point to familiar people or objects or body parts when they're asked, right? They don't point to familiar pictures in a book by 24 months. Again, it's emerging over those first 12 months and then 18 months, but by 24 months, they should be pretty independent, that they can point to small things in the book too. And sometimes, when I'm working with children, I'll, figure out through differential questioning how much or how rich of a language can they process. Say point to the apple is one thing, but then when you say point to the apple in the bucket, so that's more language, right? Apple is one single word, but apple in a bucket, or point to the girl eating an apple, that's richer language, right? And so by 24 months, it's pretty remarkable that you can help tease that apart. Another red flag would be that they do have a handful of words, but they use them over and over again, right? And that they're not adding to their vocabulary or their list upon list. And it's not about, do I really have 50 words, which are minimal at 24 months of age, but put it in perspective that the average toddler, acquires, that means masters, 10 new words a day. 10. Because we're moving from 50 words on his second birthday to 3,000 words on their third birthday. And yes, there's a range, but we need at least 50 words and we need at least 1,000, right? But the upper range would be 3,000 on your third birthday. So the other red flag, which is, I think, often pediatricians and school professionals will identify, is that the speech is kind of a jargon or gibberish, right? Is mostly unintelligible by their second birthday. If that's a concern, if they're not intelligible, meaning, 75% of what they say you can understand by their second birthday, because they're, the 2-year-old is speaking, 1 to 2 words, right? We call it the mean length utterance. What's their average length? A couple of words. But if it's mostly gibberish, or if they're, talking kind of nonsense, they're having fun with it, they're playing with their vocal sounds, but it's not meaningful, right? Those are red flags. So receptive language issues, all of these things, right? Being able to follow simple directions by 18 months, that's a receptive, understanding language, is more than just late talking, right? So keep that in perspective. So what can you do, whether you're concerned or if what I'm trying to do here is prevent issues, right? To always be a step ahead, to be able to mitigate, because, human development, child development, speech development, motor skills are not linear, right? And so it is this fluid but upward mobile enhancement, right? So here are some things that you can do when it comes to receptive or understanding language, which needs to be kind of moving along before you can really expect them to have good output, right? So simplify your language, right? How do kids really acquire their native language? We have to map it, right? It has to go in their ears and code in their brains, right? So let's simplify it. Use single words or short phrases. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And make it pretty concrete. So you're giving them a lot of opportunity to map that spoken language, right? There's a wide variety of studies, but really looking at that, a child, a healthy developing child, needs to hear on average, again, this is low average, but it's like, what will get you to the other side, 2,100 words an hour, or 1,000 words a day. And the average toddler is awake 10 hours. You do the simple math, right? So I once, counted the words up when you're helping your baby wash his or her hands. Let's wash our hands, turn on the water, get them wet, scrub, 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 dry, dry, dry. Talking your child through the steps, helping them connect the objects and the actions are about 60 words, right? If you just help them wash their hands. So give them opportunities to listen with intent and help them follow your requests. So instead of just doing it for them, because they're not good listeners yet, right? That you can say, even if you're just playing with them, or if you're trying to get out the door, where is that cow? And you're, putting your toys away, and you look around and you play helpless and you make it lighthearted. So if you want them to listen and you're just stopping in your track and go, where's the cow? And if he doesn't pick it up, if it's right there in front of them, right? You're playing a game maybe on the coffee table or at the kitchen table, right? And they're up in their high chair and you're in it with them, right? You're at their level, you're eye to eye. And if he doesn't pick it up or point to it right away, then you help him. You do the hand over hand. You help teach them. Go through the motions. And once you get it, then you're off to the races, right? So the other thing that you can do, if you're not already doing these things, beef them up, right? But demonstrate. So you pick up that cow, you put it right next to your cheek, next to your mouth, and you go, moo. The cow says, moo. You're demonstrating, and you're drawing attention to your face because he's looking at the cow. And you're putting it all together. He's watching your mouth. And every parent should be doing all of these things. And if you're worried, then you just beef it up more and more and more, right? You pick up his socks and you go, suck. Does a sock go on my ear? No, that's silly, Mama. Does the sock go on my nose? No, that's silly too. Let me find your foot. Where's your foot? And then he'll lift his foot, or you can point to it, show him, give him that cue. Again, you're more interesting than, the lights that he's focused on, or you're more interesting than, just his internal chatter, right? You're drawing him out into the environment, into the task that you're doing, whether you're playing or getting him dressed. And don't be afraid to do hand over hand. Show them, right? You're his or her first teacher. It's okay. Most kids need hand over hand in the beginning. Some kids need it 2 or 3 times. Some kids need it 200 or 300 times or thousands, right? So also at this stage, what you can do to improve, again, all parents with 1, 2, or 3-year-old, less is more. If you're playing with farm animals, I always say a field of 3, maybe 5 items that you're going to play with, right? And really help them focus, because if there's too many objects to discern, then that's overwhelming. Right? And you're mapping your spoken language so he can hear it and perceive it and understand it and then put it in real time. The takeaway, it's more important he begins to understand than to use words, right? So that's the takeaway for this. And the other key is to really make it fun, right? So simplify, use single words or phrases, narrate that 2,100 words an hour throughout the day, his waking hours, right? Give him opportunities to listen with intention. Give him some white space too. Ask him a question like, where's the cow? And then wait. Show him, right? Connect, hand over hand. And then limit the field, right? Make it fun, be animated, expressive, silly. Kids love it when you're silly. And yes, we either tend to talk too much or not enough, right? And sometimes, here's the other key. Sometimes we, all parents, teachers, aunties, whomever, might think that a child is being disobedient or stubborn, when in truth, they really can't understand or follow. Maybe they're auditorily overloaded. Maybe their internal clock is dysregulated, meaning, they didn't get good sleep, or maybe they have stomach digestion upsets, or maybe, there's too much or too little data coming at them, right? These sensory kids. And in let's see, sometime in the spring, I'm covering what is sensory integration and how, again, these different areas or modalities develop in real time with one another, right? So don't always go to, he's just stubborn, or, he's being disobedient, right? The truth is the vast majority of toddlers would if they could. And so keep that in mind. I decided to split up these 4 central pillars to jumpstart your child's talking, because we're now at the hour mark and I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed. And I do think it's important. Part of my purpose in these episodes is once again to help connect the dots, right? To find clarity. And by peeling back the layers of early child development and how the brain wires itself through everyday life experience, and how you are in charge of your child's healthy development. So for this week, put some of these things into action. Take a clear, kind of objective viewpoint. See where your child is, or your grandchild, or some of the kids you work with, and really ask yourself some honest questions and implement some of these strategies that are good for any child, no matter where they are in this journey. And if you're not sure, then go back and listen again, but also take some notes and figure out with real clarity, where is my child? And let's start there, right? And if you're trying to get him to listen and follow directions, but he's really not in the interaction engagement stage, then go there. Don't be afraid to back up and figure out what he really needs, so then you can build through natural experiences. So thanks for sharing your precious time, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with these central pillars next episode. If you're finding benefit, please share with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss this next and upcoming episode, or the future ones, because 2023 holds a lot of real healthy support for you, mom, and you primary caretakers. Also, if you would be so kind, take a minute to leave an honest review and rating on Apple Podcast. Help me extend my reach, connect with moms, and build content that's important to you, that's helpful for you, and expand my reach. I'm on a mission to reach 10,000 new moms just like you. And if you're ready to take charge, I'm ready to do it with you. So take care. God bless, and see you next week